Welcome to the Once and Future Authors Podcast. I'm Stephanie, and I'm so delighted today to be joined by author Judy Staniger. Judy is the author of Mariska's Best Laid Plan. And that's such an interesting book that really touches upon her own experiences as a social worker and working with all sorts of interesting and often difficult situations. She's also an interesting person with quite a background, and one of her favorite hobbies is one of my favorite hobbies, which is travel. So I am so excited for you to meet Judy. Thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Oh, so you're a travel aficionado, just like me.
Oh, wow. Yes, I live to travel. I'm not sure it's the best thing because there's something about traveling where you suspend your own life. So I don't know if it's what it says about us, but yes, I love to travel.
Well, I don't know. Nowadays, there's Wi-Fi, so you don't necessarily have to suspend your own life for travel.
That's true. That is very true, but it's quite recent. Yes.
Absolutely. Now, of course, you and me both, we haven't gotten to travel much with COVID going on.
No. We're planning on doing more traveling this year, hopefully, because last year I had to cancel a couple of trips.
Oh my goodness. So
Yeah.
where is the hopeful next trip? Where are you going to be going?
Well, the big one is Greece. I've never been to Greece, so we're planning a long getaway to
Oh, that sounds
explore that island. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And of the places that you have been, do you have a favorite that you'd go back to in a heartbeat?
Oh, that's so hard because there's so many of them. But I think I would say Africa because it was a safari.
You went on safari?
Yeah.
I'm so jealous.
I know, and it was a very different experience, but it was also just someone told me on that trip that I was wondering if other people had this amazing kind of sense of belonging and yet oddness, and they said yes, it's something called genetic recall.
Oh,
Because we all sort of came from there or something. I don't know if there's anything to it, but there was a wonderful feeling of being out in the wilderness and camping and at night and hearing the animals. So that would be maybe a
genetic
long, and
recall.
then there's a long second place.
Oh, and then it's a long way to second place because that was such a big first place.
Right, yeah, but I meant there's a long second place, a lot of second places,
Oh,
I
I
couldn't
got
tell
it.
you, yeah, right.
Lots and lots of places that you'd put there, but that
Yeah.
safari definitely jumps over all of them. Well, I totally get that. Now, you were not born here in America. Where were you born?
No, I was born in Israel.
Oh gosh, and how old were you when you came here?
So I was 13, pretty young, yeah, young and impressionable.
Young enough, but old enough that you had a life there.
Yes.
It wasn't like you were just two and you don't have any memories.
Oh, not at all. I have very vivid memories. As a matter of fact, what I'm doing, my work in progress currently is a memoir of my childhood in Israel.
Really? Okay.
So,
And so
yeah.
what are you finding as you're writing it? Are there things that are coming out that maybe you had forgotten about, or how's that going?
Yes, so I have a sister who's a few years older than I am, so I keep referring to her because I'm trying to write I have memories of very young when I'm 5 years old or so, and I'm surprised. And one never knows if these are my memories or really memories that are instilled in me because you're listening to adults' conversation.
Yes, I get that.
So but some of it is vivid. It's like I have pictures of it. And again, I'm not sure where they're coming from. So yeah, I'm fascinated by my early years in Israel. It's a whole another topic, but yes, I'm getting immersed into that now.
That's wonderful. Are you finding that maybe even the older you get, the more you're realizing how that part of your life has affected you? Is that what is leading to this?
Yeah, partly it was my first book, doing my first book. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized that there was a theme in my first book that I never meant to write about,
Really?
but it crept in and it got larger and larger. And I thought, well, so
Is
yeah.
that your book? Is that your book, A Quartet in Love, or a different book?
No, that's the one that I currently we're here to talk about, the Marika's Best Laid.
Oh, okay, that
Yeah,
book. Okay, great.
right. So in that book, one of my themes is the transgenerational trauma.
Yes. Yes.
And I thought, well, let me really write about my childhood and being the child of Holocaust survivors
Oh,
and how that has
gosh.
impacted my whole life. And being a therapist, hello, I'm aware of that. But I never really wanted to write or thought of writing about it.
No, I understand that. While you're talking about transgenerational trauma, let me just mention to our listeners what you write about Marika's Best Laid Plan. Meet Marika, a social worker trying to heal her drug addict clients, but she can't seem to mend her damaged self. Reeling from her mother's suicide, she avoids love because love sits too close to death. Her choices left her carefully ordered life a lonely, disconnected one. Well, I just wanted to make sure everyone understood what the book was about because, yes, transgenerational trauma is quite a theme in this book.
Yeah, yeah. But funnily enough, when I started writing, when I had the idea of writing about it,
Mhm.
that's not what I was thinking of, because I had the idea when I first started working in a methadone clinic with drug addicts, that it was a fascinating world to me, and a very foreign world in a way. It was my first job out of university, and I thought, wow, one day I've got to write about this clientele because they were fascinating. There was exasperating, but at the same time, they were so lovable and so wily. And it was just like an amazing uh, world to me. And I thought I'm going to write about them. But as I started writing it, and I realized I'm going to write more about the therapist, really, and kind of try to juxtapose how the two of them meet, and what their differences and how much they really share.
Interesting. It's
So yeah,
interesting that you started thinking it was going to be one thing and it kind of went off on a different path, didn't it?
exactly. It was going to be more about the clients and then in their world. And I realized that maybe I need to write more about the therapist in her world and see how the two of them are alike. Because in a way, drug addicts use drugs because they escape emotional pain.
Mm.
And that's where drugs are coming in, they hide. And this particular therapist has her own way of escaping pain, and she's not aware that she's doing it.
Right.
Hello, so she's trying to fix her clients, but she's not aware of her own craziness in a way.
Exactly. Is that, I would expect that people who are therapists, well, for one thing, I mean, all of us as human beings have different things that we go through, but I would think that a therapist has it exponentially because you are taking on also all of your clients, plus because you are talking about sensitive issues so often, you might be more prone to have them come up in your own life. Is that true? I mean, you're a professional.
Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely, you nailed it. Yes. Because, when you're always dealing, if someone comes to you with whatever their issue is,
Right.
and then and you're supposed to be aware of your issues so that they don't interfere with how you're treating the client. But then sometimes things come up and you realize, and right away it brings up stuff in you. And you go, they're touching on so and so in my own life. So I don't know, let's say you're dealing with someone in your family died of cancer, and here is a client coming in and they're struggling with cancer, and right away you can't run away from yourself.
Right. So what does a therapist do? Who has to do you turn down the cancer patients, or do you?
No, hopefully you don't have to. Hopefully when you're aware, first of all, you become aware. Let's say if you're very sad when the client is, and you have to be aware, well, is it my sadness? And then you kind of try to, once you're aware of it, you don't have to react to it.
Okay.
And if you're not so aware of something the client brings up in you, but you're kind of sensing that there's something here I'm not able to deal with, well, most therapists need to go for their own therapy and their own supervision, and they bring that stuff up in
Okay.
supervision.
That makes
Or
sense. That makes sense that a therapist actually needs to have a therapist to make the whole, or else the whole house of cards comes crashing down.
exactly, yeah. So but the hard part is that you can never, you're immersed in it a lot, you know, you can't get away from yourself.
Or your work. And of course, you don't want to be getting away from your work. You're doing it because it's a vocation for you. You're doing it because you are drawn to wanting to be there and be an instrument for people, even if it hurts you in some ways in the process.
Exactly. But you know, there's also such a thing. I mean, you do develop. My first couple of years, my God, I couldn't sleep at night. I was thinking about the client and what am I going to do about this one or that one, and this one is suicidal. And then I don't know how to say it, but you do develop a certain detachment. You know, all doctors, for example, I mean, patients come to them and they can't cure all of them, and they can't take it home with them, or else they won't be able to function.
Yeah, I've thought about that. My sister-in-law is a nurse, and I've thought, I don't know how anybody could be a nurse. I just so am, I think that I'd be a puddle on the floor constantly. And thankfully, she has some resilience in her that has given her the strength to do that.
Yeah.
Therapists have to be made of special stuff as well.
Yeah, you have to have that resilience. Plus, for me personally, what's I think really kept me resilient all these years, and what I infuse my book with, because I don't want people to think it's a dark book. It's some dark themes, but it's got a lot of humor. And I use humor. I use humor, you know, to look at things, to find the funny
Yes, I
in
get
the
it.
sad, you know, because this is who we are. We're all full of foibles and craziness, and you have to roll your eyes and deal with it.
Right. No, I get that. I absolutely get that. I mean, that's part of life. And tell me a little bit about the person who should be reading your book. If I'm thinking, who on my list should I buy your book for? Can you describe the person who I should be buying your book for?
Well, I think that, so it's not just necessarily for people who have transgenerational trauma or recovering drug addicts, not at all. I think it's for everyone who struggled with an issue, and it's like, well, how do we get past it? So this particular protagonist, Marika, her issue is that because her mother suicided, and that's early in the book, so it's revealed, she is afraid of loving. She runs away from love because love hurts. It hurts to love someone. And her journey is to find out that, you can't run away from love, because if you want to escape pain and love, by running away from love, your life is going to be a painful one. It's going to be a lonely and painful one. So you can't run away from the things you're afraid of. And in her case, it's love. And she has to learn to love herself and to let love in and take life for what it is. It will include pain.
And you're so right. That's a lesson, not just for someone who might be struggling with transgenerational trauma or addiction or some other, it's a lesson for all of us.
Right. So I guess maybe to come around to your question, I guess anybody who's interested in some kind of a book that will give them some introspection or take them on some journey self-discovery, or just enjoying to see someone else's self-discovery.
Oh, that makes perfect sense to me. Now, when you were writing it, you had mentioned how you thought you were writing about the patients, and you ended up writing more about the therapists. So I'm guessing that you didn't start with a big outline and you were going to stick to it page by page. Tell me a little bit about the writing process and how that went.
Oh, your guess is so 100% right. I wish I was an outliner, but I'm a pantster. You know, I fly by the seat of my.
Go with it. Whatever you are, you
You
are.
know, I think it's easier to write when you do outline. I think so, because then you don't go on the wrong roads. You know, you don't go on the other hand, um, being that I don't outline, I know my beginning more or less, and I know the ending, and I know what ought to happen. But then which road I'll take there is open. You know, it's like going on a trip. Some people have to plan every stop along the way,
Right.
and I like the journey to surprise me a little bit. So I like the characters to reveal themselves to me and tell me things about themselves. So yes, I thought when I first started that this was really going to be about the clients. And as much as I know and I've worked with them and I thought I knew them, I felt that it was going to be not as truthful coming from someone who was not an addict. I thought it would be more truthful if I was coming from the therapist point of view. So then I realized that the therapist is interjecting herself more and more. And then I thought, well, okay, so she's going to be the protagonist after all.
You know, people who don't write and who have never had the experience of having one of the players in a book suddenly make themselves more and more prominent. That's kind of what you're describing. But we've all seen movies or television programs that one of the supporting actors kind of walks away with the movie. We've seen that happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've seen, I was thinking the same thing, and we've seen it like when you watch a TV show, and in the first season, this minor character has one or two lines, but there's something about them that the next season they write them into almost like the most, important character.
Or they give them their own series.
Exactly,
Sometimes
perfect.
they get their own series. And sometimes we've seen that even with classic books, that someone who was a minor character in this book suddenly has their own book series, and I'm not sure if that's the way it was intended, but somebody was a really good actor or a really great character and they just walked away with it.
Right. They must have seen something in that character and brought it to life, and it becomes more than the one liner. I mean, actually, you're right. It's stolen the scene, in the show.
I think of movies. There was a movie years ago called My Best Friend's Wedding.
Oh,
And Julia Roberts was in it, Cameron Diaz was in it, and of course my best friend and the wedding. Okay, it was the side character, Rupert Efford played, her stylist. I think he was the best thing in the movie. He walked
exactly.
the entire movie.
Exactly, absolutely. And I'm thinking there's can't remember which Jane Austen book it was, where there was a small character or a side character, and then some author just decided to take that character and make it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they say even in The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West was on screen for something like less than 8 minutes, and yet she was the entire movie as far as I was concerned.
Yeah.
Terrified of that character. So yes, those smaller characters in the hands of a writer, the writer who like yourself is a pantser. And I don't think this happens as much with a plotter. So don't be sad that you're a pantser.
Yeah.
When you're a pantser, those characters sometimes steal the scene.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I just think at least in my experience, it just took me longer to write because it just like the rewrite was so big because the other, yeah.
It went in a
So
different direction, but that direction it went in was obviously where it was supposed to go. It was
yeah.
organic and it led you there all on its own. And how amazing of a feeling that must be. I must admit, I am not the type of person who my fingers can just go in that direction. So I'm very envious of people like yourself.
Oh, there you go. And I'm envious of people who plan, who plot.
I plan my life to the nearest minute. So honestly, I think it's just fabulous. So tell me a little bit about what comes next for you. Is there
Okay.
another book on the horizon? What are you working on next?
Right. So as I mentioned, that I'm writing a memoir.
Yes, yes.
Right, of my childhood in Israel, but I'm also toying with the idea at the same time. Too bad I can't write two things at the same time. I lived in Jamaica for a few years.
Oh,
So I had the experience of being this foreigner in a very different kind of country. I taught at the university there, and I thought my experiences are just like interesting stories. So I'm writing also short stories. I'm actually going to get one of my short stories published in a small magazine in a couple of months. So that's exciting. So I'm writing little short stories of my life in Jamaica, and maybe it will end up being a book. I'm not sure. Again, as I say, I'm not a plotter.
well, here's a thought. You mentioned the memoir earlier, but now that you have talked about the way Marika's best laid plans started this way and ended this way, how is that going with the memoir? Now, on the one hand, yes, you do have, let's say, a chronological ordering of sorts, but since you are a pantser, is it going in a little bit different direction than you expected?
I think it is already, in the sense that it's it's not so much it's about my life, but it's also the life of the community.
Mm,
It's not just because the community I was brought up in was a very small town in Israel. And this is back in the late 50s. So it's only a decade after the war, World War II. And there were a lot of survivors there. And I think they're all a little bit traumatized and a little bit nuts and a little bit crazy. So I thought, well, maybe it's not so much a memoir of my particular life, yes, but it's that whole little community.
yes, yes, and it's kind of a peek into a certain time and a certain place,
Exactly.
like a snapshot of this
Yes.
time and place in history. And yes, you are the star of this snapshot, but that puts it in a nice historical perspective also.
Yeah, you said it so well. Oh my gosh.
You can steal that for the blurb. Go right ahead. But what's nice about that too is, it also includes other people who, memoirs are so personal, and we want as writers often to find a reason for people to want to be engaged with our memoir.
Right.
Will they want to read it because of the themes within it? Will they want to read it because they know us on the outside as people? But yours, since it's going to be a snapshot of a time and a place, all of the people who were present in that time and place, and all of the people who have some sort of attachment, even if it's generational, to that time and place, have a stake in wanting to be part of your memoir and read it and engage in it.
Yeah, I sure hope so. My gosh, could you be my publicity, my marketing person? Yes, yes. Because I realized when I started writing it that there was just so much navel gazing I want to do.
I get that.
So and maybe there's just not enough to make a story. And I realized that how influenced as a child you are by your environment. And there was something off kilter in that environment.
Okay.
And so you're right. I want to take a snapshot of what it was like then in a country that was populated by so many Holocaust survivors who were a little off kilter, you know?
I'll bet
Yeah,
they were a
yeah,
lot off kilter.
yeah. So it wasn't just, yeah. So it's not just by my family and my parents and what it was like for us. It's like that whole community.
Exactly. And such a universal theme, even beyond, I said, anyone who was there or even generationally was there. But it is a community of people who are recovering from a horrific trauma. That community could be many communities of people who are
And, you know, as we speak, there is a war going on in the Ukraine, and there's going to be another community that's going to be
yes,
just like that.
yes, there is. Exactly. And
Because, you know, yeah, part of me was thinking, oh, I don't want to write about the Holocaust. We have Holocaust fatigue here. And, you know, after the Holocaust, honestly, you know, I'm like, you know, true. And then I go, but this is just never ending.
no, it's not. You're right. You're right. And and you know, it's because of people like you who are writing it down that the hope is that it does end, because people, we learn from reading about it. Now we need to get these books into the right hands, but we are like those droplets of water in a lake, and the ripples go out.
Oh, I love that. I love that visual. Wonderful.
And we hope that those ripples that are you and your book and your writing go out, and they're going to touch people and reach people. And we hope they touch the people who can stop being those,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
at least it will touch the people who need to read that there is hope.
Right, exactly. And interesting, you end up with you know, you say that because right on the first page of my novel, I quote the lines from Emily Dickinson, "Hope is the thing with feathers."
Oh, I was going to ask you about your book cover. And there we go.
Yeah.
Now I understand.
Okay, yeah, because it comes from right inside the line from the "Hope
Oh,
is that thing with feathers that perches in the soul."
oh my gosh. Now that makes perfect sense. I love that. I absolutely love that. And it's very funny. I loved your title, Marika's Best Laid Plan, because when you were describing the writing of the book, you had a best laid plan and then it went in a different direction.
Exactly. I mean, this
And
is yeah.
yeah, so both your protagonist had a plan and it went over here, and the author had a plan and it went over
Exactly.
here.
Isn't
It's a
that,
great
yeah,
title. And it's a
yeah,
great
yeah,
title, and it works so well with what actually happened. And now the feather is in perfect alignment with why that is.
yeah, and yeah,
But I think that your best laid plan for your memoir, which might have started being your personal memoir, and now is coming over here to being the story of a people, and in actuality will be the story of many people.
yeah, unplanned, unplanned.
I think that that's just such a beautiful deviation, and that your best laid plan is actually going in a different direction and will now touch even more people.
One hopes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly want you to keep in touch and let us know how that next book is going. But I do want to remind anyone who is listening about this book, because whether you are someone who is dealing with trauma in your life, or maybe you're just dealing with the fact that your life is not going exactly where you thought it was going to go. But so many of us avoid those things that will bring us joy, like love, because of fear. And Marika's Best Laid Plan by Judy Stanigar is something that you'll want to read to learn more about our protagonist. But in actuality, you'll be learning more about yourself. And wow, what a terrific book. And thank you so much for joining us.
And thank you again so much, Stephanie, for having me. I really
Oh,
enjoyed this conversation.
such a pleasure. And you know, it's such a pleasure to be with someone who is a trained professional writing a book like that. That really brings it up an extra notch. So many people try to write about trauma and abuse, but you actually deal with it on a professional level, and that really puts your
Yeah.
book in another realm. So
Well,
thank you
thanks
so much.
again.
Oh, you're
Okay.
very welcome. Thank you.
Bye.